Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. The latest edition of the Rumble in the Rockies has been all Utah, but not today. Today, it was all Colorado as they rolled past the Utes, 49-24 to improve to 8-2 on the season, 6-1 in Big 12 play. A tough day today for Isaac Wilson, threw a couple of picks, and Travis Hunter, another star performance, had an interception, scored a touchdown. It was his first rushing touchdown as a member of the Buffs, but he also gave up his first touchdown of the season, and he is now pretty much a lock for the Heisman. Just saw him make the pose there. Welcome inside our HQ studios. Jeremy St. Louis alongside Danny Kanell and Cardale Jones. We were checking the odds. Mackenzie Brooks is just off to the side of us. We were checking the odds before we came in. It fluctuated throughout the game, basically every time he touched the ball today, but now sitting at minus 240. I mean, Danny, is it a lock at this point? Is that what you're saying?
Sure feels like it. We were discussing it as well. Like, what would you do to lose the game as a receiver DB against Kansas and Oklahoma State, their two remaining regular season opponents? Like, even if you get beat for a couple touchdowns, it's not as glaringly bad as a 3-interception game from a quarterback or a loss. So I think it is virtually a lock. They've already gone over a win. Remember, there was a time at the beginning of the season where we're saying, how many wins do they need to get to have them considered? It was most people were like 7 or 8. And now that they're already there at this point in the season, it's been remarkable. It's in the story of college football. I think the Heisman voters are always kind of looking for a non-QB. And now you've got this freak, proposition of somebody playing both sides of the ball. It's incredible.
Cardale, what did you make of the performance today? Because Utah had their moments where they looked like they were kind of fighting back in. I don't know whether it was more Utah and just Colorado maybe losing some focus, but what did you think of their performance from the Buffs today?
You know, it's a typical performance by Colorado and the things they're able to do on both sides of the ball. This defense is continuing to get better, responding to all type of different adversity they deal with. And then, but my number one concern, I still have Colorado as my favorite to make it out the Big 12, but they got to be able to establish some type of running game. You're going to continue to expose Sanders to so much punishment if you don't have a legit chance to run the ball and a legit threat to run the ball of him dropping back, 35, 40, 50 times a game. But Travis Hunter was Travis Hunter today, as we typically see, and I definitely think this game has continued to separate himself from everyone else in his Heisman race.
And to your point, the Buffs only rushed for 65 yards today, 340 passing yards. So perhaps against a better team, Danny, the way that they kind of played today, maybe another ranked opponent, it wouldn't have been quite so easy.
Right, but I don't think it happens until the playoff, because the teams that they're playing against in the Big 12, I mean, even Utah, whose record is not great, they're one of the more physical defenses, so I'm not surprised that they're able to not run it against them. And again, we talked about it, remaining schedule at Kansas. I don't think that'll be a game where they have to run the football. They'll have to put up some points and have to stop Jalen Daniels. Oklahoma State has had an abysmal year, so they'll probably be close to a double-digit favorite in that game. So, and their identity, Jeremy, has been, we'll just run it enough to kind of keep you honest. And we've got one of the best quarterbacks in the country who's throwing to a wide receiving core. I think, was it you or Damien said this morning?
Said probably
it was the best wide receiving cores in the country. It's not that far off, because you got Travis Hunter, Will Shepard, Joe Horn when he's healthy. They've got weapons on the outside that they really love utilizing. So it's sort of their identity, is they don't have to, no one's going to confuse them with a team that's out there trying to ground and pound it down the field. They just want to sprinkle in the run to keep it honest, and it's working for them. And I don't think it gets them exposed until they face a more physically talented team in the playoffs, potentially.
Draylon Miller led the way with 108 receiving yards today on 6 receptions and a touchdown, but Will Shepard, the 2 touchdowns today. We talked in the pregame show about Shedeur Sanders and that draft stock, the NFL draft stock, the fact that he is probably going to be one of 2 maybe quarterbacks that are taken in the first round at this point, depending on what the mocks lay out. What did you make of Sanders' performance today, and how he I mean, he had a great game, 340 passing yards, touchdowns, did throw the 1 pick and lost a fumble, but
toughness. But the way he responded after that interception early on in the game, I mean, this kid is tough. He's not rattled at all, and for them to put so much on his shoulders, knowing, I mean, everyone in the country knows this team is not as great running the ball as throwing. So you know what you're going to get when you play Colorado, and for him to continue to find success, knowing that they're going to be dropping sometimes 8 into coverage and making the right decision, I think it speaks volume to his growth as a quarterback, as a leader. And I mean, this team goes, we talk a lot about Travis Hunter, rightfully so, but don't get this twisted. This is Shedeur Sanders' team. This team is going to go as far as they can go on the back of Shedeur Sanders.
I think it's going to be between him or Cam Ward at Miami. And Cam Ward is the upside guy because he's got a stronger arm. He's a better runner. But I think what you've seen from Shedeur is better decision-making, right? How many times you watch Cam Ward, he tries some crazy throw back across his body, where Shedeur typically doesn't make that mistake. Today's 2 mistakes were very uncharacteristic. He protects the football, goes through the system a little bit more, plays within the pocket. So I think it's going to be a really interesting dynamic of what do NFL teams evaluating, what do they see and what do they find value in. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. They're buddies. They like to work out. They talk a lot of trash together. So I wonder how that's going to play out as far as who the top quarterback is taken come the NFL draft.
How far do they go?
I think Colorado's the best team in the Big 12. I think they win the Big 12. I think they get in the playoffs. What's going to be interesting where they're coming from, do they get one of those top 4 seeds or not potentially? And then I give them like a chance versus anybody because they've got great quarterback play. But ultimately, I do think if they went against a team from the SEC or even the Big 10 potentially that can run it at them and kind of play keep away and they can't run the ball and Shedeur gets sacked 6 or 7 times. I mean, they did face Nebraska earlier this season and that game got sideways in a hurry and Nebraska's not even that good. So I'm worried a little bit about the physicality of some of those teams. But again, I'd give them a puncher's chance just because of the talent they have at the skill positions.
I totally agree with Danny. I mean, he sums it all up when you talk about I think they can play with any team in the country, but when you talk about the physical aspect that these top 12 teams are going to bring to the table when you talk about the playoffs, that's going to be the difference maker. But I think if they go out here and win the Big 12 and have a chance to host, well, they get the potential the first round bye and then playing at a neutral site, or not winning the Big 12 and having a chance to host at Colorado, I think all bets are off in that situation of that environment, how well they play at home versus on the road, and then everything else that environment has to offer.
How do you feel about, I'll ask this to both of you because you're quarterbacks, how do you feel about what you're seeing from them in terms of the mental aspect of their game? The fact that there are still some mental lapses, there's still some loss of focus in this team, and when you come up against a well-drilled team, right, and perhaps this is where maybe a little bit of Deion's coaching and experience comes into play because of the fact you've got Georgia, you know, you've got Tennessee, you've got Texas, you've got these big coaches that know how to prepare their teams mentally for big games like this, and it just doesn't seem sometimes like Colorado is as dialed in and focused as they should be. Do you agree with that, Danny, or do you think that they're
a little bit more of a chaos team, but they thrive in it, right? I mean, I remember watching the pregame locker room in Orlando. They were playing UCF, and they had a couple DJs in there. Yeah, they had a concert before the game. It's not what I'm used to, but it's what they're used to, and they're able to use it to get them fired up, and they kind of thrive in that environment. The mistakes in-game are another thing. I will say this, they've gotten a lot better than they did last year. But, and speaking of matchups that potentially could happen in the playoffs, we remember what happened when Oregon played Colorado last year. Remember the pregame speech and Dan Lanning?
That's right.
Called them out and then sent them home packing. Could you imagine if there's a rematch at some point, maybe in the first round of Oregon versus Colorado or the second round? That would be unbelievable to see.
Yeah, that would be crazy. But I agree. I think some of those mental laps that we saw throughout the season last year versus Colorado, still see some of that stuff today. I know Sanders had a big hit today that caused a fumble, and he got up and he flexed over the quarterback. Not a penalty, but in a lot of eyes should have been a penalty and would be a penalty later on down the road versus certain official groups. But those little things are, you know, they can add up and they can beat you versus these top teams that you mentioned, Georgia and other teams around the country. But each week is the great part about it. They have a chance to learn from the mistakes and to correct them.
And you can bet that Deion's surely make sure that they know what the mistakes are and know how to correct them. It's all part of the maturation process, right? This is a team, a young team. As Danny said, I love the way you phrase that. They're a little bit of a chaos team in terms of how they play. Looking at Colorado in terms of what they did, you know, how they are this year in comparison to what we're seeing last year with Deion's career. I mean, 4-8 to 8-2. It has been a remarkable turnaround, and that's full credit to Deion and kind of what he's been able to do with this team.
It's been remarkable. I mean, if Kirk Cignetti wasn't doing what he was doing at Indiana, I think Deion Sanders probably would be the runaway for Coach of the Year. And he's done it unorthodox style with bringing in all the transfers twice in a row. I mean, last year it was an experiment, rehauling an entire roster. Kind of did it again this year, but this year, after evaluating talent, have another year under his belt, he's done it and it's worked. It's been remarkable.
And another big win today for Colorado as they improve and increase their odds to get into that Big 12, championship game.